Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Slasher Quest, the show where I take you on my journey through the 1980s slasher movie catalog, one film at a time. I've been dealing with like a lot of the summer camp slash wilderness slasher movies lately, and I thought I would just continue with that. I mean, they're fun. Like I said before, it's one of my favorite styles of slasher movies. So this time I thought I would talk about Just Before Dawn. It is a slasher that is somewhat forgotten and a little overlooked, but it definitely deserves some recognition and some credit for some of the stuff it did, some of the scenery, all that kind of stuff. But so, without further ado, let's just jump right into it. So, Just Before Dawn, it is from 1981. It is directed by Jeff Lieberman, and the plot for this one is five young people venture into the backwoods of Oregon to claim a property and find themselves being stalked by a hulking, machete wielding psychopath. The plot is pretty cliche. It's definitely something we've heard plenty of times before. This one, though, kind of throws some twists and turns in there. It keeps it interesting, but it is rather formulaic to its core. It's one of the early 80s slashers, and I've said it so many times doing this. The early 80s ones spent time building characters, making things interesting, and they're usually the strongest entries in the genre. There's some outliers in the late 80s, even some in like the early 90s, but the bulk of the good ones come from the early 80s, and this is why. So in this one, we get something a little bit different. Like, we don't get teenagers for once, but we get like some probably 20-year-olds. They're probably supposed to be 20-year-olds, but I mean, it was the 80s, so they had 30-year-olds playing 20-year-olds. But like the plot says, they go out to the woods to claim some property that some guy like inherited or something or got from his dad. I don't remember exactly. And once they're out there, strange things start happening. There's like this random girl that pops up, and she looks almost feral. It kind of builds off from there. I guess we can get right into the kills. There isn't too much else to say about the plot because it's so basic. The kills, we get these two hunters that are like drunk and they're out in the middle of the woods. They stumble across this old church and they decide they're gonna like check everything out. One of the guys' names is Vashel or Vachel. I'm not entirely sure on the pronunciation. Uh, my guess it's probably some kind of like French Canadian name or something. But he's there with his friend, and his friend is played by the guy who played Mel, the owner of the camp from Sleepaway Camp, the guy that I said looks like he has a fish face. So I wasn't even aware that he was in any other slasher movies, and like I've seen Just Before Dawn a couple times. I decided to do it this week because I wanted to go back and revisit it and see um, if I missed anything. And I remember enjoying it before, so I wanted to just revisit it. But anyway, so Vachel, they say he gets castrated by like this big hillbilly guy. But you don't really see that. He kind of just gets stabbed. Like, I didn't see any kind of like lopping or slicing off of any area down there, but that's what I'm seeing everywhere, is that everybody's saying he got castrated with a machete. And like his friend ends up getting away and he tries to warn everybody. Now, like, the people coming into the woods start showing up, and the group of friends kind of gets picked off one by one. The first one is Jonathan. He gets pushed off a cliff uh, by the the big hillbilly guy. And then there's Daniel. He gets stabbed in his stomach with a machete. We get a lot of machete kills in this, so it's kind of like Jason style, but not as imaginative or as over the top as like Jason would do. These are like straightforward. The next one we get Megan. She gets actually stabbed off screen with a machete. So that was like our first off screen kill. Now we find out through the movie that there's not only just one like huge, rather rotund hillbilly killer. There's two of them. They're identical twins. Their names are Lucas and Luther. That's kind of an interesting twist because you really You really don't see it coming. I mean, when they're wearing different clothes, but they're similar enough that you really probably wouldn't pay too close of attention. The final girl in this, her name is Connie. She's kind of resourceful and kind of a strong character. She's rather intelligent. Like I said, she's resourceful, and like the guy she's with too is a pretty solid character as well. So she realizes that there are two, and we get like a face off towards the end. You know, with your typical slasher fare. Chase through the woods, fighting back and forth. You know, big hulking guy trying to take down a smaller woman. She does get some help by George Kennedy's character of Ranger McLean. He actually shoots Lucas, but Luther is still battling with Connie, and she takes him out in like a really strange way I've never seen before in a horror movie. It made me laugh because it's kind of absurd, but at the same time, like, yeah, it'd probably work. It's just kind of gross. She gets her hand and like shoves it down in his mouth and like pushes almost her entire forearm down his throat until he like smothers to death. It's it's like I said, it makes you laugh, but at the same time it's kind of effective because you see Luther like struggling to breathe, and all of a sudden he just goes limp, and it's kind of disturbing. And her acting at the end is really effective as well because she's just kind of like in a daze and like, oh my gosh, like what just happened. But that she ends up surviving at the end. So this is definitely above average slasher movie, and one that gets kind of overlooked sometimes. I mean, people that are kind of diehard slasher fans will talk about it, just because it does try harder than a lot of other entries in the genre, but it's not anything that's really going to blow you away. I mean, it's not as good as The Burning or The Prowler that I've talked about before, but it is miles better than Scream, the 1981 Scream. And to compare it to I guess the other ones I've done, I mean, this is better than Camp Fear. It's better, or it's not as good as Sleepaway Camp. I mean, Sleepaway Camp is one of my favorite slasher movies, so it's kind of hard to compare. Yeah, this is definitely worth a watch if you've never seen it. There's a couple interesting things in this. I mentioned that there's not just one killer, there's two, and they're both kind of physically intimidating, which is a kind of a cool change and something that makes it stick out. And apparently, like when they were making this before, this movie was going to have a very heavy like religious theme, and it was going to be called Last Ritual, but that was scrapped. I guess you can kind of see some leftovers of that because you see like that abandoned church out in the woods, and that's kind of where the twins live. They also have like that feral sister who has like a connection with one of the guy characters. I'm terrible with names unless it's a movie that I've seen like tons of times, like Nightmare on Elm Street or something like that. But I can't remember like all the characters' names other than Connie and the two killers, Lucas and Luther. But the characters themselves are likable. There's no one that's really like, oh, I can't wait for them to die, which is something that the ones from the 2000s really laid heavy into, especially like the remakes of like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, where it's like you're waiting for characters to die and you're not like rooting for them. And I feel like that's something that gets lost in the slasher genre, especially now. I guess we can get into the grade here. You guys know my grading system by now, so we'll just dive right in. So I have like the different categories. I got FX, the acting, the plot, the end, the killer, the kills, and the replay value. For this one, the FX, I gave a 7. I thought they were pretty solid, but it was nothing like, blow you away. The acting is an 8 because I thought everybody did a pretty good job in this, from relatively unknown actors. It was impressive how they were able to make a connection with the audience and everything. The plot, I give a 7 just because I like backwoods slashers, and I like the twist of having two identical twin killers, but at the same time it is kind of cliche, so it couldn't go any higher than that for me. The ending I gave a 6. I just that kill where she shoves her hand down the guy's throat was kind of bizarre and just made me laugh. I don't know. I guess when I want to see a slasher villain get his comeuppance, I want it to be like gory and over the top. The killers, I gave a 6. I like the idea that there's two of them, but at the same time, there's really nothing that makes them stand out. I mean, they're just kind of like tall, fat guys in plaid with glasses, and it's just I don't know. That just doesn't resonate with me. There's nothing like if you saw a picture of them outside of this movie, you would have no idea what movie they went to. The kills I gave a 7. It's mostly just machete kills, but they were handled rather well. It didn't look cheesy. That they weren't like ridiculously over the top and make no sense, so they were effective. And the replay value, I gave a 7 because I enjoyed this movie. I like the scenery in it. That's probably one of the biggest things. There's a scene where they're on like this big rope bridge that's going across a canyon, and that is really cool. It's one of the main things I remember from this movie. The things I remembered were, that rope bridge, and I remember that there was two killers that were identical twins. Is what made this movie stand out to me. Anytime slashers are shot in like the woods, it's always, you always get some really cool like establishing shots and like scenery and background. So that's definitely one of the main strengths in this one. So if you have never seen this movie, if you enjoy backwoods slasher movies, if you're a fan of The Burning or Friday the 13th, or even this has some hints of Texas Chainsaw Massacre in it too. So if you're a fan of any of those, give this one a shot. It's not gonna blow you away. You probably enjoy a relatively have a relatively good time, but yeah, it's not an instant classic, but it definitely deserves more recognition than what it gets. So next time I like to fly by the seat of my pants. I'm not sure what I'm gonna get into. It might be another backwoods slasher. I mean, I've been in like a chain of those lately, it seems like. But yeah, we'll see when we get there. But until then, as always, be kind and rewind.